I was tuning a line array when I realized the room was lying to me. The greenhouse roof at the botanical garden throws the sound back in a soft arc, the kind that flatters speeches and punishes guitars. I leaned into the console, nudged the 400 Hz down half a decibel, and let the room show its real shape. Wedding parties like to believe the night is theirs to conduct. But a space has memory. It keeps the last vows, the last laughter, the last argument breathed through a veil. If you listen long enough, you can hear a building sigh at the next promise it's about to hold. My wife, Kara, was somewhere between the dessert table and the photo booth, pretending not to be the kind of person who arranges lighting with her eyes. She can make the word ambient sound like a job title. I watched her from the wing of the stage while the officiant rehearsed his jokes. Kara smiled at the bride's mother and practiced being indispensable. I've seen her practice before mirrors and men with the same technique. I should have been flattered that she used it on me once. Mostly I was tired. We weren't supposed to be here as a couple to be admired. The groom was one of Kara's college friends, and I was here because I make rooms behave for a living. I do live sound. Build signal chains for people who think music is a synonym for mood. Make feedback disappear and keep microphones from humiliating anyone. My work is the art of invisible control. You feel it when it fails. You forget it when it's best. In another life, I could have been a therapist. People say the same sentence to both jobs. I don't know why it's doing that. At 4:37 in the afternoon, while the sun pressed its face against the glass like a curious child, Micah Sterling walked into the venue wearing a grin he'd ironed. He hugged 3 groomsmen and counted the room like it owed him interest. I knew his name before he told me. Kara and Micah dated a lifetime ago and never stopped auditioning the pause between them. He's the kind of man who spells social with an LLC. He sells growth to companies that mistake volume for value. When you talk to him, you feel like he's already told your story to someone more important. I checked the talkback, tapped the mic twice, and asked the coordinator if the string quartet needed a monitor. She said no, but asked me if I could make the DJ later feel less like a club. I said I could make anything feel like anything as long as the power held. Somewhere to my left, Kara's laugh took a shape I didn't know anymore. It rose through the glass, hit the steel, and fell back into the flowers, pretending to be furniture. I had believed Kara when she said Micah was ancient history told for laughs. And I had believed myself when I told myself I was not the kind of man who keeps score. But sound men are paid to notice patterns. In rehearsal, Kara asked the coordinator whether the bridal party suite had a full-length mirror and whether the VIP bar by the west exit would be staffed during dinner. Micah drifted towards that bar twice before 5. He didn't look for me, and I didn't follow him. We were both faithful to our crafts. The ceremony was beautiful because most are, if you mute knowledge. The vows were clean. The quartet found the sweetness without spilling into sap. And the audience cried at the appropriate nouns. I rode the faders like a canoe through a shallow river and let the officiant believe he had invented sincerity. Kara stood in the back with her hand on the bride's mother's shoulder like she was grounding her against static. Micah whispered something to a groomsman that made him wipe his eyes in a way that didn't look like grief. Between the ceremony and the reception, there is a half hour nobody owns. It's a space where photographers become dictators and bartenders become priests. I used it to reset the patching and push the subwoofers 2 feet to the left because the glass had decided to sing at 60 Hz. The photo booth guy waved me over. He's one of those freelancers with a smile that apologizes for how much he charges. "Hey, Archer," he said, reading my name off the tape on my case. "Your DI box saved my soul last weekend." I told him I'd invoice him for the sacrament. He laughed and said the booth's ambient mic had a weird hiss I might hate. I stuck my head behind his curtain and listened. The hiss was the air conditioning negotiating with the heat. I told him to notch out 8 kilohertz and call it a day. He offered to comp me a print later. I said I don't take pictures at weddings because I like to remember people as rumors. Micah and Kara found a shadow that wasn't trying to be one. They stood by the west exit and pretended the garden beyond the glass was the thing they were looking at. You can learn a lot about two people by measuring the air between their shoulders. Friends leave a polite inch of civic space. Enemies leave a canyon shaped like pride. Lovers leave an argument. I watched their air buckle. Kara lifted her hand as if to make a point, and then let it hang in the kind of gravity that happens right before someone lies. I could have stared down at the console and given them privacy. Instead, I watched because my ears had already told me the truth, and sometimes your eyes deserve to be treated like adults. I didn't follow them out of the exit. I didn't need to. If this is a revenge story, the first act is not the betrayal. It's the choice not to perform the discovery. I stood at the console and soloed the channels I knew would hear them. The booth's ambient mic is technically for laughter. Those hoarse little spills of noise that make strangers feel like they know one another. In practice, it picks up confession. There's a reason some people whisper in wardrobes. I soloed the booth, trimmed the gain so the AC hiss didn't bury the room, and listened to the room breathe. There were heels on cement, a soft slap of a door not meant to be dramatic. The delayed applause of a wedding trying to make new shapes of its own story. Then I heard Kara's voice, wearing a tone I used to think was only for me. 5 minutes, she said. Room 328. Micah's voice answered in a smile. I already know which hall camera doesn't work. He was wrong about that. The camera works. The security guard who believes in people more than they deserve does not like to bother anyone unless he has to. The memory card is his friend. I didn't flinch. I took my fingers off the console and let them hover like I was telling myself I hadn't already decided what was next. I pulled my phone from my pocket and wrote a note the way I log cues. 6:12 p.m. Kara plus Micah, west exit, room 328. Ambient mic capture. I put the phone face down on the desk and looked at the ghost of my face in the screen. It looked like a man watching a decision behave itself. I didn't go find them. I didn't text Kara, and I didn't call Micah by the names he calls himself in the mirror when he needs help. I went to the coordinator and told her I needed a copy of the schedule with the catering ingress times. And while she printed it, I asked in the tone professionals use with each other if we would have access to the service hallway footage in case of a safety incident. Always, she said, and handed me a sheet that had the hall cameras labeled by number. I'll send any incident pull to you and the venue manager, she added. I nodded and asked for her card. She gave me 2. At 6:23, I watched Kara walk back into the greenhouse with cheeks arranged to be photographed. She went straight to the head table, told a story to the bride that used her hands and borrowed authority from affection, and took a piece of bread without asking because she is a woman who believes grace applies to her. Micah returned 5 minutes later, adjusting the cuff of his jacket like control were a sleeve you could roll back down. He avoided my area for 10 minutes. Then he came and stood 10 feet away from me like he hadn't decided which version of a man he wanted to be for me. The DJ arrived early, which is rare and therefore felt like a gift. He's one of those good ones who thinks energy can be shepherded without humiliating anyone. I shook his hand and made a joke about how much better his life would be if he wagged less at the 1 kilohertz. He laughed and said he owed me a beer. While we were setting his monitor mix, he asked if the photo booth guy could run his audio into the DJ's recorder for the couple's reel. I said sure, if the booth guy had signed a release with the venue and the couple. He had. I watched them plug in, tickled by the fact that tonight's truth was determined to be redundant. By 7, the speeches were ready to embarrass. The best man did the thing where he pretended to be bad at toasting so that his practiced sincerity would land like a surprise. The maid of honor cried correctly. I rode the gain like a man teaching a room to inhale. Kara's laugh got brighter for a while. When Micah glanced at her, it dimmed to a signal only she would understand. I wrote another note. 7:41, MOH speech, eye contact, west exit, 328. At 8:11, I texted Amara Chen and wrote, might need counsel soon. She answered, the good kind or the kind where I leave a movie? I wrote, I'll bring you popcorn if it becomes the second kind. Amara is the lawyer I call when I want paper to feel like gravity. She is allergic to theater unless it's pro bono for a high school she likes. I told her I would send her a preservation letter draft in the morning. She told me she already had one for our venue on file from a case last winter. I'll pull it up and update the names, she said. Do not improvise. At 8:23, I left. Not dramatically. I checked the board, told the DJ I'd loop back if the subs got unruly, and told the coordinator I'd be in the truck making a phone call. I walked through the service corridor I had already asked about and said good evening to the security guard because you should know the names of the people who keep your rooms honest. His name is Miguel, and he has a softness around his eyes that looks like work. I told him the AC in the hallway was making a sinister noise and asked if he wanted me to put a listen on it. He said he'd get maintenance to do an ear in the morning. He asked if the party was the good kind. I said it was the kind that would be prettier in photographs. He smiled like a man who has seen more weddings than he wanted to. In the parking lot, the valet stood like a soldier whose war is parallel parking. His log sat on a podium, and I could read the entries upside down because it is my job to read what doesn't want to be read. I asked for my car and tipped him like an apology for the future. As he jogged to fetch it, I wrote the time in my notes. 8:23, Archer leaves venue, valet ticket, number 218. The night smelled like plants pretending to be perfume. I didn't go home. I drove to the hotel that services the garden because places like this always work with a pair. The lobby had the same tired prettiness as every coastal hotel that believes sunlight excuses carpet. I asked for the manager and remembered how to smile like a professional. Her name was Janelle. I told her I was the sound engineer for the event and that I needed to leave a business card because we had an incident earlier and wanted to make sure any footage from their hallways near the elevator was preserved if there was a guest complaint. I used the word liability 3 minutes into our conversation because it's a magic trick you can sell to people who don't like magic. She didn't give me the footage. I didn't ask. She wrote down my email and promised to inform security if there were any requests. I thanked her for her time and asked her if their keycard system logged individual door events by room number or only by floor. She said both, like a person who wanted me to stop talking. I did. Back in my car, I sat until my hands stopped telling the wheel secrets, and then I drove aimlessly. Which is another way of saying I drove past the beach and let the night stick its fingers through the window into my hair. I thought about the first time Kara told me a story about Micah, and I thought about how names sometimes feel like a coin your mouth isn't sure how to keep. I thought about people who cheat, and whether the only thing that separates them from people who don't is a calendar and a camera. I thought about how I had no interest in asking her why. The why is a myth people cling to so they can avoid living in the what. By 9, I was in my apartment with the lights on like a man trying to be his own lighthouse. I forwarded Amara the bullet points and the times. I typed up a preservation letter and a courtesy copy for the venue and the hotel. And I used the phrases that make professionals put their pens down and listen. Chain of custody, safety incident, cooperation anticipated. I attached my notes, the schedule, the coordinator's card, the valet ticket number, and a picture of a lemon my neighbor Nia had left on my counter last week, with a note that read, "For honesty." I didn't send the lemon. I kept that for myself. I didn't sleep. I rested my eyes and taught my chest to rise and fall like it belonged to someone who trusts his own breath. At 6, I ran by the water until my legs told me to return my brain to its owner. At 8, I went back to the venue under the pretense of checking the console, which I did, and then asked the coordinator if we could put some language in writing about the request for footage in case anyone got skittish. She nodded like a person with a calendar and gave me a bland email that admitted nothing and promised everything. Per request from audio contractor, any footage relevant to safety or property disputes will be preserved for 30 days, pending written instruction from management. Perfect. I forwarded it to Amara. Around noon, she called. "Do we want to do this quietly, or do we want to do this correctly?" she asked. "Both," I said. "Good," she said, "because correctly is quiet until it's not." We went step by step. She would file preservation letters with the venue and the hotel, including room 328 and the elevator bank nearest it. She would contact the booth company to copy the card from the ambient mic. She would draft an ex parte motion if we discovered dissipation of marital assets. Translation: if Kara moved money to that man's LLC the week before the wedding because she thinks consulting is a synonym for skirt. I said nothing because silence is worth more when you mean it. She told me not to confront Kara. She told me not to move out without first locking down the bank account's notification settings. She told me to reroute my deposit if I could. She told me to make dinner and eat it like a person who doesn't want to be dramatic. I tried to argue. She told me my appetite matters in court. "Judges like people who look like they sleep," she said. "I cannot prove this, but I know it." We hung up and I made eggs because complicated food makes you lonely. At 3, the booth guy emailed a link that shouldn't have existed yet and apologized for being early. "I figured you wanted the magic," he wrote, as if magic were something you could unzip. The file was an hour and a half of laughter and gossip and the occasional piece of honest human noise that makes you like people again. At 6:12 p.m., a voice that belonged to my wife said, "5 minutes. Room 328. At 6:13, a voice that belonged to a man who sells adjectives said, "I already know which hall camera doesn't work." I clipped the minute before and after, wrote a note about gain structure and room noise, and sent it to Amara. She replied with the best compliment a lawyer can give. "This will help a judge stay awake." The venue manager called and said Miguel had pulled the hallway footage from between 6 and 7 because there had been an incident with a guest spilling wine in an area that needed to be mopped. The camera saw the west exit. It also saw Kara and Micah walking out of it at 6:10 p.m. and returning at 6:20 p.m. with the smugness wiped gently off their faces by air. He said he could not give me the footage directly and that any police request would be honored. I thanked him and sent Amara his number. She knows how to make a police request feel like a community service. The hotel manager, Janelle, emailed me because she had decided I was a person who liked lines straight. She said that in the interest of guest privacy, she could not disclose door logs without legal process, but that she wanted me to know that she sympathized with anyone who needed the truth to make a decision, and that she would cooperate as legally appropriate. That is what kindness looks like from institutions. It's not flowers. It's the removal of obstacles. When I finally spoke to Kara, I did it by text over the app we had once installed because she liked adding stickers to our grocery lists. "I'm staying at my place tonight," I wrote. "We can discuss the week's plan tomorrow." Communication by written message only, please. She typed, paused, erased, and wrote, "You're being weird." I wrote, "I'm being careful." She asked if she had done something wrong. I wrote, "You have created a situation we need to handle with paper." She answered with a question mark, as if confusion were a charm. I closed the app and went back to listening to air. 2 days later, Twist 1 became evidence. The booth audio clip matched the hallway camera's timestamp within 6 seconds, which for wedding vendors is practically a handshake. The DJ's recorder had eaten a copy of the booth mic and pooped it out with a cleaner noise floor. When I compared the files, I could hear the door hinge sigh at 6:11 in both. I wrote an affidavit that would make a monk proud. Amara smiled in a way only a person who studied for a bar exam and remembers her flashcards can smile. "We have chain," she said. "We have consent on the booth audio. We have routine business practice on the hallway video. We have notice to preserve. We are not cowboys." Good. Twist 2 showed up with a flourish. The valet log, photographed by a man who cares about typography. At 11:17 p.m., the night of the wedding, Sterling M. returned to retrieve a black Tesla and was seen leaving the lot with female guest, dark hair, silver bracelet. Per the valet's notes. Because valets are poets when they want to be. The bracelet detail made my lungs remember a moment I had decided not to keep. Kara's wrist on the patio, caught in the light like a small moon. I copied the log and filed the feeling. Twist 3 needed a subpoena. The hotel's keycard audit for room 328 showed 3 entries between 11:35 p.m. and 1:10 a.m., all with a card assigned to Micah. I didn't need to ask if Kara was in the room. The minibar charge told me. Celebration set. It read, "Charge to Sterling Social LLC." In a small mercy, the description did not include hearts. Twist 4 arrived uninvited. Micah's friend, Trent, posted a behind-the-scenes story on social media that included a bathroom mirror selfie from a hotel room. In the corner of the mirror, reflected and then straightened by anyone who loves the truth, you could see Kara's bracelet. She had a thing about silver. She said it didn't argue with her skin. I took a screenshot, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because evidence is less fickle than memory. Twist 5 came in the form of a payment that should not exist. A week before the wedding, on a Tuesday afternoon when the city pretended it was a reasonable place to live, Kara paid Sterling Social LLC a consulting fee. The memo said, "Brand refresh." The amount was rounder than round numbers usually are when they've been earned. This is where people who want a story from me expect heat. Yelling, cold open, a scene at a bar that smells like old courage. I wrote a declaration. Amara filed a motion for a constructive trust on the amount paid to the LLC and a temporary order preventing further transfers. She attached the audio clip, the logs, and the screenshots. We served Micah at a cafe where he pretends to work. He posted a quote about haters and then deleted it. That is a confession, in its way. Kara tried to call me. I watched the phone light my kitchen the color of a decision I didn't need to make. I let it ring and kept chopping the red onion I didn't actually want. She texted, then wrote an email. Then wrote to my mother, because people who love the audience more than the scene always call in extra cast. My mother wrote back, "Archer asked for quiet. Please respect that." Then she called me to say she hated Micah on sight, even before she had a reason, and that I should remember to drink water. I drank water the way advice tastes when you finally decide to accept it. When Kara finally wrote a message worth answering, it was simple. "Can we talk?" I wrote, "through counsel." She wrote, "You're being dramatic." I wrote, "I'm being documented." She wrote, "This is ridiculous." I wrote, "This is a record." She wrote, "Are you serious?" I wrote, "I am a sound engineer. I live for Sirius." She didn't reply. I went to bed with a lemon on my counter and woke up with the sun, deciding I had slept enough. The mediation was set for a Wednesday, which felt like a day that could hold contradictions. We sat around a table that looked expensive and sad. Amara was quiet until she wasn't. Kara's lawyer tried to introduce confusion as if it were evidence. Amara placed the chain of custody documents in a row, like cutlery. She kept her voice low, which has the effect of making other people raise theirs. It is always obvious who has the truth in a room. That person doesn't need the air to like them. Kara tried to explain the booth audio. "We were talking about a joke," she said. 328 is a song. You wouldn't know it. Amara slid the keycard audit across the table with a neutral wrist. Kara looked at the door like a hallway would save her. Micah didn't show. His lawyer did, along with a man from the LLC who used the word partner like a shield. "Our client denies any wrongdoing," the lawyer said. "Our client received a legitimate consulting fee for brand work." Amara asked to see a sample of the work. The lawyer said that would not be possible due to client confidentialities. Amara said, "We didn't ask for secrets. We asked for a single deliverable." The lawyer said, "No." Amara wrote in her notebook, which should scare most people more than yelling. Then Micah did the thing men like him do when their mirror tells them the truth. He folded before anyone asked him to. He sent a packet of messages to Amara at the lunch break. They were between him and Kara, and they were not written for daylight. He sent them because a constructive trust looks a lot like the government asking if you tie your shoes. He sent them because if one of them was going to be the bad guy, he wanted her to audition for the part. Amara read them, drew a check mark next to 3 of them, and returned to the room. She didn't dramatize. She asked Kara's lawyer to review them. The lawyer looked like a person swallowing a bee. We did not settle in the room because the room had no use for honesty that day. We settled a week later with paper and commas, and the kind of sentences that make human beings behave. The funds Kara paid to the LLC came back to a neutral account. Fees went to me not because I needed victory, but because the court likes to encourage people to stop lying while there's still time. There was no explosion, no finale, no monologue. When it was over, the mediator shook our hands like he doesn't believe in germs. I went home and ate an orange with my hands over the sink and let the juice run like proof. Kara sent one more message with the old voice in it. "You didn't have to make me look bad," she wrote. I wrote back because sometimes mercy needs an audience of one. "I didn't," I wrote. I let the room speak. I put my phone down and counted to 100 because I am a man who learns slowly and then remembers fast. What did I do after I left the wedding? I took a shower hot enough to insult the water heater and then cold enough to remind my body it belongs to me. I changed the destination for my paycheck. I told my landlord we would be speaking on email. I asked my neighbor Nia if she would water the plant I pretend not to care about if I forget. She said she would, and that the plant prefers podcasts about people being decent. I laughed because sometimes living is just making someone who counts laugh. I didn't tell my friends. I told 2 of them. One said he would help me burn down the city and then sat with me while we ate tacos in the dark and didn't. The other said she had a sofa and a bat and neither would help. She was right. I slept on my own bed and woke up on my own terms and brewed coffee like a ritual that might summon a version of me I respect. I didn't stalk Micah's socials because that would be like eating salt to cure thirst. I didn't stalk Kara's either. I let the apps go unanswered and the algorithms miss me. Weeks became a way of knowing I chose correctly. The judge liked that I had dates and not adjectives. The bank liked that my requests sounded like I was asking them to do their job instead of become my pal. The venue liked that I had said please. The hotel liked that I had said thank you. I liked that my voice had learned the difference between loud and true. When people asked what happened, I said, "We changed arrangements." When people asked why, I said, "The room told us how it wanted to be used." That is a lie that is truer than most truth. Then there was the dinner. Ruth, Kara's mother, invited me because she believed in roast chicken the way some people believe in confession. I went because I wanted to see what an apology would look like if it happened at a table. Kara didn't apologize. She brought a salad and set it in the middle like she was giving the room an anthem. Ruth asked if we could be adults. I said I was practicing. Kara asked if we could move on. I said we could move correctly. Ruth said she was going to church on Sunday. I said I would be fixing a PA in a room that echoes, which is similar. After dinner, Ruth handed me a Tupperware with chicken like she was slipping me courage. She said, "You were a good husband." I said, "I was a husband." She said, "You were good," again, because mothers cannot let you escape with only half of a compliment. I walked out into the Santa Barbara night, and the air felt like a lens wiped clean. The next morning, Amara sent me a bill that made me flinch and then say, "Worth it." She had itemized her time in a way that make minutes into allies. I paid it with pleasure. She wrote back, "You are my favorite client this month because you did not attempt to be cinematic." I told her I would try to keep my life boring enough to get a discount. She said sincerity gets a coupon. Kara and I negotiated the rest of our division with less blood than people expect. She kept furniture that had opinions. I kept equipment that makes noise into order. She said she wanted the houseplant because she had grown attached. I said she could have it. The plant died a week later, according to Nia, who happened to be walking by their window. Nia said it was probably the light. I said it was probably the water. We agreed to disagree in a tone that makes you friends for real. On a Tuesday, I saw Micah across the street at a cafe trying to look interested in a deck full of lies. He didn't see me, which was our best moment together. His wrist glinted in the sun like a product placement. I remembered the sound his voice makes when he's trying to be an inside joke. And I remembered that the room had caught him. I did not feel victorious. I felt accurate. It is not the same. Months later, after the decree landed with all the signatures people use to promise they will stop promising, I mixed a charity show at a community center that smells like ambition. The headliner showed up late, and the kids were restless in the way kids are when the lights make them feel like they could be bigger if only the adults would let them. I dialed in a vocal reverb that made an average voice sound like a memory. The artist sang about regret, and everybody clapped for their own secrets. I packed up cables in the quiet after and thought about rooms and truth, and how sometimes the only kindness you can offer is to turn the volume down until someone hears themselves. The last time Kara texted me, she asked if I could return a sweater. I said yes and left it with Ruth. Ruth asked if I needed a lemon. I said I had one and that it had done its job. She said, "I'm sorry we used you up." And I said, "You didn't. I was a cup with holes." She laughed and then cried, because she's a woman who knows two things at once. Every once in a while, somebody asks me what the surprise was. The title writes itself, they say. I tell them the surprise is that nothing caught fire. The surprise is that the room did not make me shout. The surprise is paper and time, and the way a camera does not care for your reputation. The surprise is that I left and did not turn around to measure what I'd made. I let the building keep its memories, and I made new ones that fit. On the first anniversary of the wedding, I found out who I had married, I stood on the venue's back path and listened for the note I must have missed. The greenhouse sounded like a chest learning to breathe. The garden made the kind of noise that grass makes when it forgives feet. I watched a bride practice a smile and a groom practice a joke. The coordinator waved at me like a colleague, and I waved back like a man who still believed in microphones. Miguel saw me and asked if I needed help. I told him I was just making sure the AC wasn't singing at 60 hertz anymore. "We fixed that," he said, and patted a vent like an old friend. "We fixed a lot this year." I believed him. When the DJ asked if I could help him notch out an ugly resonance around 800, I did it with the ease of a person who finally knows which frequencies belong to him. The room calmed down. The promises sounded like they had a chance. I walked outside and called my mother and told her I was eating. She said, "Good," I said. "It is." I haven't spoken Micah's name out loud in a long time. I don't avoid it, I just don't invite it. Names are cables. You coil them wrong and they kink. You coil them right and they lay flat for years. I am learning to coil things. I label both ends. I check continuity. I test before trust. I let the signal be what it is without turning it into a song it can't carry. If you are reading this for fireworks, you bought the wrong ticket. If you are reading it for the recipe, it is simple and awful and effective. Notice, write it down, ask in the right tone, serve paper, eat, sleep, repeat. Do not argue with rooms that show you their shape. Do not sing at frequencies that make you cruel. Do not rehearse speeches for people who have rehearsed lies. Leave when you must. Arrive where you can be quiet. Let regret belong to the people who earned it. Build a system around your sanity and then obey it like rhythm. Kara will regret it forever, yes. Not because I made a spectacle. Because I refused to. Because no stage means no applause. Because without applause, you are left alone with your own microphone. And it is a cruel instrument when you've tuned your life for anything but truth. I didn't take her voice. I gave her all the silence she needed to hear it. Tonight, after load out, I will go home to a small apartment that smells like lemon rind and honest sweat. I will put my hands on the console of my own day and pull the faders slowly down. I will write the times. I will label the cables. I will put the plant near the window and water it. I will text the 2 friends who know how to sit without fixing me and tell them I'm making eggs. I will sleep. The room will keep my breathing. Tomorrow, there will be another wedding. Another room with a memory. Another human making a promise. I will be there, asking the air to stop lying, and I will do it quietly, as if quiet were the only kind of revenge that works. In the weeks after, I kept learning the small devotions that hold a life together. Label the hard drive, back up the truth, pay the bill on the day it is due, breathe on purpose. When I feel the old noise rise, I take out a cable and coil it the right way, letting my hands remember what order feels like. Normal is a craft. You sand it, you oil it. You return to it when storms pretend to be news. I don't ask why anymore. I ask when, where, who signed, which camera saw, and whether the paper can carry the weight without tearing. Nia brings me oranges and gossip about bikes. I trade her silence and a screwdriver. We call it even and mean it. On Saturdays, I fix a volunteer stage at the community center, and the kids teach me that feedback is just ambition pointed at the wrong part of the room. Some nights I write a single line in a notebook. Today the room told the truth, and I believed it. I keep the lemon on the top shelf like a small sun I can move with my hand when the real one refuses to be useful. Amara says that dignity is just patience with good paperwork. I decide to believe her until I have a better religion. When I pass the hotel, I don't look up to the 3rd floor. I look at the curb where cars arrive and leave without promising to stay. I have started cooking rice without checking the pot. I let timing be a teacher instead of a test. If regret knocks, I let it wait on the porch. If it learns manners, I might invite it in for water. I send thank you notes to people who did nothing dramatic. I want my life to be full of those. The booth guy emailed me a holiday card. I archived it under good people who charge too much and are worth it. Regr, Miguel waves when I pass the gate. Sometimes he taps the camera housing like a drummer, keeping time for a band I can't hear. I bought new labels for the cases. Not because the old ones didn't work, but because the new ones tell me I survived the last tour. When the room hums at 60 hertz, I reach without thinking. When my brain hums at sorrow, I reach slower and turn down the gain, one click at a time. I stopped counting the days since the wedding like a sentence. I count them like a set list, each song offering a place to breathe. I will fall in love again, I assume. If I do, I will treat the truth like a monitor mix and keep it loud enough that neither of us pretends we can't hear it. If you see me at a party, I will be near the wall listening to the corners. That is not distance. It is the work I learned to love. In the weeks after, I kept learning the small devotions that hold a life together. Label the hard drive, back up the truth, pay the bill on the day it is due, breathe on purpose. When I feel the old noise rise, I take out a cable and coil it the right way, letting my hands remember what order feels like. Normal is a craft. You sand it, you oil it, you return to it when storms pretend to be news. I don't ask why anymore. I ask when, where, who signed, which camera saw, and whether the paper can carry the weight without tearing. Nia brings me oranges and gossip about bikes. I trade her silence and a screwdriver. We call it even and mean it. On Saturdays, I fix a volunteer stage at the community center. And the kids teach me that feedback is just ambition pointed at the wrong part of the room. Some nights, I write a single line in a notebook. Today the room told the truth, and I believed it. I keep the lemon on the top shelf like a small sun I can move with my hand when the real one refuses to be useful. Amara says that dignity is just patience with good paperwork. I decide to believe her until I have a better religion. When I pass the hotel, I don't look up to the third floor. I look at the curb where cars arrive and leave without promising to stay. I have started cooking rice without checking the pot. I let timing be a teacher instead of a test. If regret knocks, I let it wait on the porch. If it learns manners, I might invite it in for water.